Charles Mester here, a very highly experienced attorney, and I thank you so much for coming and taking the time to be with me and also answer some of the very common questions that I get from sellers and buyers. And I thought we would just have a little chat about that so they can hear from you and also your services and what services you provide. So, why don't you introduce yourself and let us know all the different services you provide inside of real estate?
Sure. Thank you, Amber. Thank you for having me on today. Much appreciated. It's a beautiful day outside. So,
Yeah.
New York is a great place to live. So, anybody that's looking to buy in New York, you're going to have great weather some of the months of the year. Don't
Yes.
worry. It's
Or at least you'll enjoy the good weather so much because then we do have the winter.
absolutely
Yeah, yeah.
okay. I'm a five season guy, so I like all the
Me
seasons.
too.
So it's
I
yeah.
moved here from Canada, so for me this is not cold. I
I'm
lived
from
in
this
Montreal.
area. I was born in New Jersey.
Mm.
I went to college and law school in New York, and I'm still here. So I really love it in this area.
Mm.
So yeah, let's get into what being a real estate lawyer in New York City is all about, right?
Yeah.
So I've been
Yeah,
in
so
the
I had some questions that keep coming repeatedly, and I thought it would be good questions to ask you. And one of them is they kind of come after the fact, right? It's like what could the seller have done, or sellers who are putting their property on the market could have done prior to signing a contract, so they don't revert back to those problems at a time when time is of the essence these days, especially with turning into a buyer's market.
Sure, sure. Well, most of the time when I get involved as the attorney, they've already established a relationship with somebody like yourself,
Mm-hmm.
as you know, the realtor and an experienced realtor such that you are guiding them on things that would, are ultimately going to help the attorney at a later date when I get involved.
Yeah.
So, what do I mean by that is that you've already, for a seller at least, you've already um, looked at the apartment. You've seen situations that might need to have a repairs done before the open houses start or before other brokers come in for a showing, and before buyers come in, because you want to make a great first impression on that,
Mm-hmm.
when you first doing the showings, and you want to make sure that that apartment stands out amongst others, you know, in the same price range. So what you do is really important, and I think that uh, at least in the boroughs, when there's actual single family or two family homes involved, there are home inspections that are traditionally done by a buyer before they even sign the contract.
Correct.
In New York, I'm licensed in New York and in New Jersey, so
Mm-hmm.
it's slightly different process, the way that the home inspection process works. So in New York, which is I'm going to focus on here, but if anyone's moving to New Jersey,
Oh
you
no,
know,
absolutely. I get a lot of people who have assets after they've sold their property and want to invest in New Jersey also. So
absolutely.
thank you for that. Absolutely would be.
Yeah, yeah. New Jersey seems to be a place where people, they could afford a little bit more there.
Mm.
And it's still within a commuting distance from wherever they work. And so it's a place where a lot of people migrate to after they sell their New York, their smaller place in New York by a bigger place in New Jersey.
Yeah.
So let me explain how that works. In New York, buyers will it's tradition to do their due diligence on the apartments or on their houses before the actual real estate contract is signed. That binds them to a deal with with you as with the owner of the place. So because you're doing a home inspection before the contract is signed, you want to make your best impression on your property, because any kind of things that continuously, stand out in a negative way is
Hmm.
going to affect the way that they negotiate the price of your house. So you want to make sure that things are at least, look good on the outside. And if things are not working on the inside, such as the mechanicals, electrical issues, etc., you want to make sure that those are repaired. So
That's
they're
a
working.
really good point. I
Hmm.
also find in estate sales when someone has inherited a property and they haven't lived in it in a long time, I recommend maybe not do a full blown $500 inspection, but at least have an inspector run through the property or have your agent who is competent enough to at least give you a list of things that an inspector does look at, just so you don't end up paying so much more in the last minute and negotiating when you have a really good buyer that, if you can invest in fixing those, great. If you can't, you should at least go into it knowing these things are going to come up and I'll have to come up with a number to negotiate it, so get an estimate, right, from a handyman maybe to be able to say, hey, these are fixable.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially when it comes to an estate situation where nobody in the family is actually living, uh, in the property.
Right.
Most of the time, those are sort of they don't want to put any money into the property.
Right.
It's like, okay, whatever it's gonna sell for. You do your best deal, Amber, your best work, Amber,
Yeah.
negotiating for us,
Yeah.
and we just want this off of our hands.
Yeah.
But they don't realize that they're cutting themselves short sometimes,
Yeah.
because a little bit of an investment could go a long way in more money in their pocket. So,
100%.
but everybody has a different mindset about how much they want to get involved in the process
Yes, and
of,
understandably, right?
mhm,
Everyone has different schedules or priorities. They're like, I'll take the loss, just get rid of it. And some
right.
people are like, no, I want to get every dollar out of it. I have the time myself to invest in it. And so, yeah, it really, you're so right. It
Yeah,
really depends
yeah.
on their own mindset.
Exactly. I mean, for an estate situation, you're going to have possibly the representative, meaning the executor or the administrator of the estate. Maybe they'll be in New York as well, or not far
Mm-hmm.
from the property, but
Mm-hmm.
maybe they live in California,
Mm-hmm.
and
A lot. Or one in
they're
California, one in Philadelphia, one in New
right.
York.
Yeah, I don't know. The families just spread out these
Yeah,
days. Very,
various places.
back in the old days, the young people stayed with their elders,
Yeah.
and everybody sort of saw each other throughout each stage of their lives. And now everybody, the world has become a smaller place,
Yeah,
so,
I think we're
so people
circling
go
back to
further.
it though. I think we're circling back to it because of the economics of things. Kids are trying to stay with their parents because they can't afford the lifestyle they get with that in a small apartment. But really good point. So to circle back, like prepare the property, you would say find out if your water bill is paid or if it isn't, how to get a proper reading for it. I know that in Queens we're seeing a lot of the water meters now being installed in a new way, and some are in transition. We're also seeing the same thing in electric, because once you call the electric company, they're like, well, we don't have a digital meter yet. So try to do those things a little bit in advance, call those companies and not have to deal with that. What do you think about the survey? Because I've seen a few issues where the owner of the property didn't realize that the neighbor they are so friendly with put their fence 2 feet into their property, and now that fence has been there for 5 6 years, and there was no agreement that the neighbor could inch in 3 feet 2 feet, and if you take those 2 feet in up to 10 feet, you've got a lot of square footage now that's going into your property, and sometimes that can be a problem. Um,
Oh,
yeah.
it becomes a big problem. Surveys are really important when you have properties that are so close to each other. and there are fences that have been installed. If
Yeah.
there's no fences, there's not really an insurmountable issue there because nobody is preventing somebody from accessing their property up to the property line. But
Right.
once you've established a barrier, such as a fence or a
Yeah.
gate,
Mm-hmm.
that maybe blocks off somebody from their own property, it
Mm-hmm.
definitely becomes an issue. I'm handling a case right now in which somebody has done that to a client's property of mine. After they purchased it, there was a gate that used to remain open all the time, so there was access. And then all of a sudden, the neighbor closes the gate, locks the gate, and the gate is attached to both houses. It's not just the one house and the other house. Uh, and
Typical.
the
Yeah.
occupant has been very unreasonable. They've been violent because
Wow.
my client tried to get a contract, had a contractor that was going to build a fence,
Mm.
within their property line in order to eliminate this problem. And the occupant of the house actually came out and threatened the contractor. So it's become a big enough deal that they've decided to hire me to try to. The owner is an investor. So
I noticed in your
it's tough. It's
in
a
all
tough
your
situation.
services, you also wrote litigation. So you do real estate litigation in these situations.
I do.
You would,
I do. I
okay,
do. Well,
that's very important to know.
yeah, one of the things that I guess you want to say that where I stand out from other real estate lawyers that just do closings is
Yeah.
that I actually started my career as a commercial litigator out of law school, and I've
Oh,
continued to litigate for 32 years that I've been practicing, but usually within the realm of real estate. So
yeah.
if there's a dispute that needs to go to court,
Yeah.
and let me tell you, I'm not the first one to run to court. I like to try to resolve things because
Yes.
once you go to court, things get very expensive.
Yeah.
There's a whole different way that lawyers charge
Yeah.
people when you
Yes.
have to litigate than when you're just doing a real estate closing.
100%.
Just for example, you have to charge by the hour usually on a
Mm-hmm.
litigation
Mm-hmm.
because it's a, unknown amount of time because it's all a strategical thing. There's another lawyer on the other side. You don't know how many times you're going back and forth to the judge. Um, there could be a trial if you can't if it doesn't get resolved before that point.
And it
So
can become so costly in the
it
end.
does
You,
because, the hourly rates, at least in New York City, are pretty high for at least for an experienced attorney such as
yeah.
myself. So it can start adding up very quickly.
You know, I got myself certified as a mediator
Oh,
because
okay,
yeah,
that helps. Have you done
yeah,
have you have you done
yeah,
any
yeah,
mediations?
100%. And
Oh,
landlord tenant, divorce, they don't want to talk to each other. They want to drink enough poison so the other person dies, which never works
uh,
out for anyone. So I kind of do, the three main, they have to be willing to mediate and everything's confidential. And then I kind of put them in a room if they want to be in a room or keep them in separate spaces to come to sometimes a price agreement or an agreement that is put in writing in the end, and then someone like you comes in to make sure you endorse the agreement and it's signed by an attorney,
hmm.
so that because I'm not a legal counsel but I can mediate. So once the agreement is written, then an attorney comes in to sign, and also notarize it and say, okay, this is what they've agreed on in case
Yeah,
they
no,
break the agreement.
absolutely. That's usually, something that is, everyone's more comfortable with a conclusion like that, of
Yes,
course. You
yes,
want it to be binding. You don't want to have to go through this a second time because somebody finds some loophole that
yes.
I tricked them into thinking that we settled, but I really didn't settle with them. But
And you
you
need
know,
to have real estate knowledge if you're going to do any real estate
yeah,
mediation because you know the loopholes. So you bring up those questions right up front and be like, what in this situation? What about that situation? Because all these situations are realistically happen, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah. And with real estate, just so your audience understands this, Anything binding has to be in writing. There's a law in New
Good
York
point.
called the
Mhm.
Statute of Frauds, and if what that means is that if you don't have an agreement in a written form, it's not enforceable in court. Just because you have a handshake with somebody or verbal back and forth, that's not going to do it in the state of New York, or most states actually.
Most states,
But
yeah.
so that's why having somebody such as yourself that that at least knows the importance of putting things down in a written
Everything.
form.
You
That's
bring
why
up
we
such a
have,
good point. You bring up
yeah.
such a good point. Even buyers, sellers, they're like, "Oh, can I keep that couch? Can that sofa?" And I'm like, I don't sell the furniture, but whatever you guys agree on, the attorneys can put that on a as an addendum to
Yeah,
the
yeah,
contract because it's
yeah. We
conditioned.
could do. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to do that, but
Right, right.
that are not so time intensive
Yep.
for things like that. But and usually that's worked out amongst the parties.
Yes.
You could even even an email can be binding if
Exactly.
it's
Good
sent
point.
and then responded to affirmatively.
Yes.
So you don't have to have an actual document signed, notarized, etc. It could be as simple as an email going back and forth that creates that binding agreement.
Implied contract. Correct.
Yeah,
Yes. I
absolutely.
had a divorce
There's case law
couple.
like that.
Yes, I had a divorce couple where the husband was had put something in writing about the distribution of the property, and she, in some kind of emotional way, had agreed that he can have the house. And he was enforcing that email. Of course, it didn't fly because they hadn't signed the divorce documents yet, and but he tried to and say like, look, this is why I got the divorce because you agreed to leave me the house. Um,
Okay. Yeah. Well,
yeah,
I mean, you can't blame him for thinking that
no,
way if that's what she's,
for trying, yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
But
that's a good point for your audience saying that okay, even if some silly thing was put into an email that makes no sense, at all,
don't just
uh,
say yeah, sure, whatever.
it doesn't
Yeah,
mean, a judge is going to say, okay, you said that in an email, so I can't make a different decision. It depends on the substance of what we're talking about. When you're talking about, a house, which is the major asset of a married couple,
yeah,
I don't think an email is going to fly. When you're doing the divorce agreement and the separation situation.
yeah.
So you have to have sort of a more of an equitable distribution when it comes to that type of stuff.
Right.
And there's a lot more involved, especially if there's children. So
Yeah,
yeah,
but that
so I'm
brings
not
me to
going
my
to go.
next question is
Hmm.
addendums to the contract, right? So we just talked about contract and what to be ready for. Understand your property, understand your bills, any liens that might be on title. See if you can go to public record to see if anything's been recorded on your property, which is very common in Queens. We have something known as a sidewalk lien, which I see 1 in 10, 15 properties actually. The sidewalk lien is something that is not the responsibility of the homeowner, but it is because it becomes a lien because the sidewalk wasn't fixed. So it's a gray area. It has to be done because it comes on to attach to the property. And it's an example of some of the kind of liens, garbage liens. Sometime one day you didn't put the garbage out on the right day, and you gotta, or your tenant did that. They continue to
Yeah.
accumulate garbage in front of the property. You got a ticket for
Amber, it is amazing. The city is out there searching for
that. Looking.
violations.
Yeah.
This is how
Yeah.
they make all their money in addition to
Yep.
paying your taxes.
It's like driving, right? It's the cops are looking to give you a ticket on things. When so is the city on
Yeah,
maintenance of your property.
yeah.
So I would say they prepare in that way. And then you pointed to a really important thing about things being in writing, because what happens with us as agents is that the whole contract's complete and something new comes up. For example, a lien that showed up after the fact. and it didn't show up in public record, or it recorded a little later and it pops up, and then an agreement needs to be done for that. Like, is the seller going to now reduce the price because of it, or is the seller going to forward an expediter or escrow that amount until the expediter removes it so they can get their money back? Usually the escrow is more than the amount of the lien because there's no guarantee it will be removed. So
Yeah.
these things again go as part of the contract as an addendum, correct?
Yeah, I mean, well, those are sort yes, they're two different things, but the contract sort of memorializes the rights between the sellers and the buyers. It's if it's not in the contract, it's not in the deal. Okay,
Yes.
so that's what I like to tell people.
Yeah.
Everything that you think that you, that's why when I interview or speak to somebody for the first time, and they're, either a buyer or a seller, I ask them, what if you were writing up the agreement, what would you want to definitely be in your contract?
Mm-hmm.
Because I get all the basic things that way. I don't get the legal things I know to put in, but I
Yeah.
want to know what's in their head, saying because that's what they're thinking of, right? On their property. So I will now take their answer and I'll create a provision in the contract that's legally enforceable with that information that they've now given me, and that most of the time is in the addendum or the
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
amendment to the contract. Okay. An
Fantastic. Yeah.
addendum is just basically the difference between an addendum and an amendment. It's very slight difference, but there are differences. An addendum is like a supplement to the contract. It's not
Mm-hmm.
changing anything within the original contract, where an amendment will actually be a separate document, but it will change something that's in the original document.
Mm-hmm.
So both of them are utilized, and both of them are attached to the original contract, and together they form one agreement, and they
Yeah.
both have signature areas on them. So the seller and the buyer will sign both documents, and then that is the complete agreement between the parties. So let me tell you a little bit about that document, because that's the most important document in my mind in a real estate transaction, is the contract. There's been a lot of time spent by the bar associations in New York State and New York City to create a template or a form contract
Mm-hmm.
that is as fair as it can be for both sellers and buyers. But it doesn't include, remember, it's only a form. It was not created for your particular house or your particular co-op apartments or your particular condominium.
It's
So
general and it covers most stuff, but not the details for your particular situation, right? Would
right,
that be
but
fair to say?
it covers a lot of the major things and a
Yeah.
lot of the contingencies that a buyer would want in a transaction, such as a mortgage contingency, title, clean title, clear title. That's all in the contract. Sometimes there's a few more details that have to
Mm-hmm.
be added to those provisions,
Mm-hmm.
that an experienced attorney, such as myself, knows to put in there
Mm-hmm.
or to take out of the contract. Because
Mm-hmm.
you'll get these templates, these form contracts, and you'll see, okay, let me explain how it works. In New York, the seller's attorney prepares the first draft of the contract.
Thanks for that. Yes.
It's not done by the real estate agent, unlike in New Jersey, where the
Yes.
real estate agent actually prepares
Yep.
uh, a form contract and sends it for signature. In New York, that's not how it works. In New York, there can be an offer sheet, and then the
Offer
offer sheet,
sheet has to have the
right,
price, the promise
right.
of the buyer, but it's not binding because there's
It's
no
not
exchange of
binding.
there's no monetary exchange. This brings up a whole another 20-minute
Yeah, yeah,
webinar about.
we can't talk about everything today. You know,
No, no,
we do
we'll
have
do
a
another
time
one
limit.
sometime soon.
We
Yes,
could go on to a part two another day,
yes,
but there's a lot of
absolutely.
there's
A
you know
lot of
this is a
stuff.
big area, New York,
Good
city
point.
real estate.
I'm gonna make notes about that. This is a whole whole
Yeah.
another dialogue. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, we could talk all day about New York City real estate,
Really, we could. It's
but
so complex and so different from other states. People don't really realize it. Transactional coordination job of an agent in New York is a whole job. When I get people saying, "Oh, I have a transactional coordination coordinator in California," I'm like, "You have no idea what a transactional coordinator would have to do in New York to close the transaction because we have legs growing out of a transaction that just keep growing if you don't catch the problem very earlier on."
yeah.
But
But it's
yeah,
interesting you say that because New York is very attuned to the fact, that we use attorneys for a real estate transaction in a residential in the residential field,
yeah,
where most other states, well, New Jersey does it, but only on part of the state. There's
hmm,
like a different rule in the northern part of New Jersey than in the southern part of New Jersey. And if you go to other states like Florida or just for example, the real estate lawyer has very little. Some people don't even use them.
yeah,
It's everything is sort of focused in on with the realtor and the title company, and I find it just hard to understand why
yeah.
states have sort of
Imagine for
gone that
me,
direction where you're
yeah,
dealing with legal rights, but you're
yes.
not using an attorney. Uh,
Completely. When I bought my property in Florida, I bought an investment property in Florida, in Pennsylvania, and
mm,
every time I was like, what is happening? Because my head couldn't comprehend how the whole transaction was put together and how I met my attorney at the closing when I think he should have spoken to me before that, right? But
okay.
and then I paid a $500 fee to a legal counsel, which they told me I didn't need. And now that I think about it, I didn't because the agent did. It's very, very interesting to me
Yeah.
how all of that works. But
Yeah.
again, that's for a whole another, whole another podcast. So
Right, right,
we're
exactly.
staying with contracts and legal stuff, putting things in writing, the significance of that. So my question now is to your litigation services because I think it's very cool that you have those. Not that I do not wish upon anyone to have to need them at all, but it really helps clients to know that if they're in a sticky situation as their real estate attorney, you can also represent them if things that were put in writing, like addendums or amendments, are not being honored. That you can be helpful in that to
Yeah.
reinforce them.
Yeah. So for maybe there's two ways that that could happen. Number one, somebody has used a different attorney to do their transaction, and the attorney didn't do a good job with the documentation, and now there's an issue, and they don't do litigation, so the
Yeah.
realtor is now find somebody like me who, usually they word of mouth or that's how I get most of my work. It's all through word of mouth. I'm not actively out there advertising myself as, real estate attorney for people.
For
And
litigation, you mean?
for litigation. Yeah, yeah. So but it's uh so what happens is basically so I get to litigate other people's contracts. And
Mm,
then of course there's the contracts that I'm doing as a,
mm,
when I'm the originating attorney, and that I have to enforce sometimes if
mm,
somebody is deciding not to abide by those contracts.
mm,
And let me
mm,
explain, when you're a seller
mm.
and the buyer, let's say, decides for whatever reason, I really don't like the house anymore. I want to just get my money back
Yeah.
and move on to another house. Well, once you sign that contract, there are ways for a buyer to get their money back, but you can't just change your mind and get it back You have to have a legal reason under the that's listed in the contract for you to be able to cancel the deal and get your money back if you're a buyer. Most of those are limited to two things. One, there is a mortgage contingency clause. The buyer, needs a mortgage to get it. The seller agrees to say, okay, we're going to allow you to apply for a mortgage, and if you don't get the mortgage, we're going to give you your deposit money back, and you get to walk away. But a buyer can't do nothing and expect to get
So
their
this
money back.
brings a really good
Yeah.
question. If that happens to my client as a seller, I would um, I would ask the attorney who's representing the seller to let them know that the buyer has to get qualified by one of the banks. They don't have to use that bank, but they have to go to a bank that the seller is now recommending and find out if they didn't use that as an excuse to get out of the contract. So
Hmm.
this way they can be underwritten one more time. This is something I've had to do, unfortunately, one time, only because I knew that the buyers were found another property. I just happened to find that out, and they were just changing their mind.
Hmm.
It was in bad faith, and guess what? Once they were asked to use another bank, they did not pull out of the property. They ended up staying on and purchasing it, and at the closing, being very happy about it. They were having a regular, expected buyer's remorse, which, as you know, representing buyers, it happens. Buyers get into something and then they start to think, did I do the right thing? It's like any commitment, right? A house is a pretty big commitment, and then they start to think, oh, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, and they have a moment of remorse. And in that time, if I was representing the buyer, I usually hold their hand through it, try to address their concerns. But if I'm representing the seller, I would protect the interest of the seller depending on who we're representing. And we'll do
Absolutely.
a whole another Zoom,
Yeah. Yeah.
podcast on buyer representation very
Yeah. I
soon.
mean, it's not just buyer remorse, there's seller remorse too, because I remember when I bought my house
Sure.
that I have
Yeah.
right now, sitting at the closing table, the seller says to me, I could have sold this house for more money. You got a good deal here. They felt like, okay, he could
Yeah.
have gotten more money out of me or some other
Yeah.
buyer. So that
Yes.
was his remorse.
Good point.
So
100% true. Sellers have remorse too. Absolutely. They're like, oh, we had so many good
everybody
memories
thinks they could
there.
get, sellers always think they could get more money than they're
Yeah.
getting because, oh, if somebody's willing to pay, $1 million, they're willing to pay 1,050,000, right? So
I don't
it's,
mean to brag, but I've never had a seller think that they could make more money
oh no.
because the negotiation part of it, I walk them through it. I will let them know, like, look, we had only this many people come to the showing. That means we're a little overpriced. And
Yeah.
if we got only one offer in 2.5 weeks, that means we are overpriced. We've done 3 open houses. We've had 3 people come to them. It's a sign that
Yeah.
we don't have a price that's attracting people. So if we get somebody at this price, this is really,
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, in my case, I was involved in a bidding war and I came out ahead
then they could have,
of everybody else.
yes, then
So
they're
that's
they're justified in believing that,
And
because
let me
whenever
tell you,
you put,
it took a lot
yeah,
of when
yeah,
you're in the process, and I'm a real estate lawyer, so
yeah,
I'm always seeing it from the outside, but when you're actually the
in it,
participants here, your whole demeanor changes. It's like, okay, how much do I go up? Do I go up, 10,000, 20,000, 100,000? I mean, it's like I don't want to be I want to get the house, but
yeah,
I don't want to spend ridiculous amounts,
amount of
but I
money,
don't want
yeah,
to underbid so
and
I
lose
lose
it,
out on the. It's a
yeah.
very, very,
It is a
hard
very
thing. But
interesting
you know
point you
what?
make.
That is why having an experienced real estate agent such as you to guide them is really the most crucial part here. Yeah, yeah, the lawyer is important. Everybody should
Lawyer is very
have
important. Actually, the
Everybody
team,
needs to have an attorney, but not any attorney. Everybody should have a real estate attorney,
agreed,
to help them along this journey because
agreed,
you don't want
100%.
most people don't deal with attorneys on a, on a regular basis throughout their lifetime. And let's say you had a car accident, you had a personal injury, situation, you have an attorney.
Different attorney.
That's not the attorney you should be calling to do your house,
100%. You make such a
situation.
good point, Charles. And
And
and I think at the end of the day, it's not just a good attorney and a good agent. I think it's also the communication between them. We had recently such a bad experience because the attorney would not talk to us without us telling the client to have them respond. It became a nightmare for the client too, and it is unfortunate when that happens. It's very rare because I try to be as easy, as compliant, as workable, as experienced. I share my experience with them, but sometimes attorneys just don't have the time. They don't want to have another, and that ended up giving him so much more work in the end.
of
So
course,
much more time got wasted of everybody's because little details just got on. I
right.
think communication is the key on any. I mean, we all
Communication
know that
is
as professionals, right?
I've
Teamwork.
been doing this for over, 32 years, and
Oh, God bless you.
the
Yeah.
reason I keep getting new clients and calls from realtors such as yourself referring me is because I do communicate. I do respond to phone calls. My phone is on 7 days a week. I work
Yeah.
on weekends. I work in the evening. I work throughout the day. So I always say that, I'm always going to get back to somebody either by text, by phone, by email, within a reasonable amount of time of them contacting me.
That's amazing.
And
And I will say, as we're ending our call, I will say, Charles, knowing you through this call and also the few conversations we've had, I think it's such an asset that you do have litigation, not because you will use it, but it really helps the client to be assured in today's time, unfortunately, especially when I find people are picking fights for no reason. And it's so sad to say it, but you know it, right? I'm
Mhm.
finding people more easily upset than easily, workable.
Right. And
People
one
are
of the
not
other things,
rolling over problems as easily
sure.
as, yeah.
One of the other things I'd like to offer your audience is if they have any questions at all regarding this process, call me on my phone. I could give you my number now, 917
I have it.
6. Oh, you
Yeah.
have it. Okay. You,
We
you'll,
will
you'll,
run a we will run
you'll
a
run it.
banner for
Okay.
that. Yeah.
Call me on my number. There's no charge to call me and speak to me about your situation. I'm happy to go over things with the person so they understand, the timelines or what's next or what they have to do. And like I said, I don't charge anybody until I actually start working on the transaction itself. There's no charge for
Amazing.
that, for this, initial conversation. Maybe there's two conversations that we need to have. Still no charge. But the fact is, I want to start the relationship. I want to start the communication. I want to make sure that the people feel at ease about the professional that they're hiring, and I'm here to be that person. So, thank you for having me
Thank you.
on
Oh,
today.
absolute pleasure. It was
Hmm.
so great. So great. Thank you.
You're welcome, and we'll be in touch. Okay, bye.